February 2010. A family of 4 vanishes without a trace from their home in Fallbrook, California. No signs of struggle. Dinner left on the counter. 2 small boys' toys still scattered on the living room floor. For years, investigators searched for answers, until, in the middle of the Mojave Desert, they uncovered a scene straight out of a nightmare. This is the story of the McStay Family Murders, and how a trusted friend became the face of unthinkable betrayal. Joseph and Summer McStay were living what looked like the perfect California dream. Joseph ran a successful business, Earth-inspired products, selling decorative fountains online. Summer, a devoted mum, was homeschooling their 2 young sons, Gianni and Joseph Jr. Friends described them as warm, creative, and family-oriented. They'd just moved into their new home in Fallbrook, an up-and-coming area north of San Diego. They were settling in, or at least that's what everyone thought. But within days, their world and their lives would be gone. On February the 4th, 2010, the McStay family's SUV was seen leaving their driveway around 7:47 p.m. No one would ever see them alive again. When family and friends couldn't reach them, they assumed the McStays had gone on a short trip. After all, there were no signs of trouble, just an empty house. But as days turned into weeks, that calm surface began to crack. When we entered the home, it looked like they'd just stepped out for a moment. Eggs on the counter, the dogs left in the yard. It didn't make sense. The family's SUV was found abandoned near the Mexican border, its seats filled with toys and paperwork. Surveillance footage appeared to show a family of 4 crossing the border on foot that same night. The world thought the McStays had simply left, but those who knew them best refused to believe it. For nearly 4 years, theories swirled. Had they fled to Mexico to start a new life? Had they been targeted by a cartel? Or was something far darker at play? Investigators followed every lead, but the trail was cold until November 2013. In a remote stretch of the Mojave Desert, a motorcyclist stumbled upon human remains buried in shallow graves. DNA testing confirmed the impossible. Joseph, Summer, and their 2 little boys had been murdered. The family had been bludgeoned to death. The scene was horrific, but the question still burned. Who could do this to them? And why? Investigators turned their attention to Joseph's business. His company had grown fast, maybe too fast. One name kept resurfacing: Charles Chase Merritt, Joseph's business partner. Merritt was charming, street-smart, and good with his hands. He built the fountains that Joseph sold online. To the outside world, the 2 men were a success story. But beneath the surface, tensions were boiling. Merritt was reportedly in financial trouble. He owed money, had a gambling problem, and was the last person to see Joseph alive. When detectives examined Joseph's QuickBooks account, they discovered something chilling. After Joseph disappeared, someone was still writing checks from his account, and every one of them was made out to Chase Merritt. Merritt claimed he was just helping the business continue after Joseph's disappearance, but the numbers didn't lie. He'd written over $21,000 in fraudulent checks, all within days of the family vanishing. As investigators dug deeper, they found phone records placing Merritt near the McStay home the night of February 4th, 2010. And then, something even more damning, Merritt's cell phone had pinged off a tower just miles from where the McStay bodies were buried. The evidence was stacking up, and Chase Merritt's story was falling apart. On November 5th, 2014, nearly 5 years after the McStays vanished, Chase Merritt was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors alleged greed was the motive, that Merritt killed Joseph to cover his theft and silence the family forever. But even as the evidence mounted, Merritt insisted he was innocent. What followed would become one of California's most haunting and drawn-out murder trials, a decade-long journey through lies, evidence, and the mind of a man who couldn't let go of his own delusion. After years of mystery, detectives reopened the McStay home, not as a missing persons scene, but as a murder scene. Every detail took on new meaning: the half-eaten eggs, the open laptop, the dog food spilled near the door. It was as though the family had been interrupted, mid-life, mid-meal, mid-breath. The evidence pointed to a sudden, violent departure. But with no blood, no signs of forced entry, and no weapon, detectives knew one thing for sure: whoever did this, the McStays trusted them enough to let them inside. And one name, again and again, surfaced: Chase Merritt. To many, Chase Merritt was Joseph's right-hand man, a skilled welder, charismatic, loyal. But behind the charm was chaos. He had gambling debts, maxed-out credit cards, a criminal record for theft and burglary. He was a man living on borrowed time and borrowed money. Detectives discovered Merritt had been embezzling thousands from Joseph's business in the months before the murders. When confronted, Joseph reportedly threatened to cut him off, a decision that may have sealed his fate. What followed next, prosecutors would later describe as rage-born brutality. In the digital age, even the most careful killer leaves a trail. Investigators traced Chase's phone records and discovered a haunting timeline. February 4th, 2010. The night the McStays vanished, Merritt's phone pinged near Joseph's house around 7:47 p.m. Hours later, his phone traveled north, toward the Mojave Desert. Then it went dark. When it powered back on the next morning, it pinged just miles from the shallow graves. He thought the desert would keep his secret, but phones don't lie. Investigators subpoenaed Joseph's QuickBooks files and found that, just days after the family vanished, someone wrote 4 checks from Joseph's business account. Each one payable to Charles Merritt. Each one forged. Experts compared the handwriting, the loops, the pressure, the slant. It was a match. The evidence was clear. After murdering his friend, Merritt sat at Joseph's computer and paid himself using his victim's money. He didn't just kill the family. He looted their business, as if nothing had happened. The graves told their own story. Joseph and Summer were buried together. Nearby, 2 smaller graves held Gianni and Joseph Jr. Each victim showed blunt force trauma inflicted by a sledgehammer found near the site. Detectives determined the family likely died inside their home, their bodies transported 100 miles to the desert in their own SUV. Merritt's phone data lined up perfectly with that grim journey. The desert had kept their bodies hidden for 4 years, but it hadn't kept his secret. After his arrest, Merritt became his own worst enemy. He couldn't stop talking, to reporters, to the court, to anyone who would listen. He claimed he was being framed, that someone else killed the McStays, that police ignored evidence. But each time he spoke, his story changed. One day, he said he barely knew Joseph. The next, that they were like brothers. Then, that Joseph had been killed by the Mexican cartel, or even his own wife. His arrogance wasn't just bizarre, it was fatal. Prosecutors used every contradiction to paint a picture of a narcissist consumed by greed and guilt. In January 2019, 9 years after the murders, the trial of Chase Merritt began. It would stretch for months, one of the longest and most complex trials in San Bernardino County history. Merritt chose to represent himself for part of it, firing multiple lawyers along the way. He turned the courtroom into a stage, arguing with the judge, cross-examining witnesses, and delivering rambling monologues about his innocence. But the evidence spoke louder. The forged checks, the phone records, the sledgehammer. Piece by piece, the puzzle assembled itself, and every line pointed to Chase Merritt. On June the 10th, 2019, after months of testimony, thousands of exhibits, and years of waiting, the jury delivered its verdict. Guilty. 4 counts of first-degree murder. As the judge read the words, Merritt showed no emotion. Behind him, family members wept silently. In January 2020, he was sentenced to death. The McStay family story is more than a murder mystery. It's a reminder of how evil often hides in plain sight. A friend, a handshake, a business deal built on trust. For years, the McStays were seen as the perfect family, but behind their success was a shadow waiting to strike. In the end, their killer wasn't a stranger. It was someone who shared their dinner table. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with silence. And in that silence, the desert still whispers their names.